idea for all this really came from a dream?
Yes, it did.
Oh, hello. So this is going to be exciting.
I have to start over.
Oh no, what happened?
I never pushed the audio. Sorry, everybody. I'm retarded tonight. So, good evening. Welcome to Nox Mente. Twice. Tonight's guest is Nicole Frolick. Nicole is an international expert on flexibility, an inspirational speaker, intuitive life coach, co-host of the Enlighten Up podcast, and the author of Inflexible Me, Expanding Past the Inflexible Barriers of the Body, Mind, and Soul. Nicole believes in being the model of the change you wish to see in the world and demonstrates that through living authentic. Coming out of the spiritual closet in 2016, she has used her YouTube channel as a platform to speak her truth and share her experiences and knowledge that have led her through a transformative process of self-alchemy. Her deepest joy comes from sharing this process with others through her intuitive coaching, tarot readings, variety of online courses available in her Inflexible Me Academy, her latest program called AlcheME, guided meditations, her book Inflexible Me, and her weekly podcast Enlighten Up. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me again.
Round two.
Yeah. Good things, happen in twos. Why not?
Second time's a charm.
What's funny is since I got up today, this morning, like I needed to check in on my schedule, and I pulled up my computer, which had a 70% charge. And as I'm in there pulling my calendar up, the whole thing drained. Like
oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. And it's been like that repeatedly all day, like weird electrical stuff and kind of like weird false starts today. It's just been one of those weird days.
I wonder what's going on in the Schumann resonance.
I was thinking the same thing, Nicole. Because it's been consistent.
That's all fake news. Come on.
Whatever, Jer.
I think the Schumann resonance spikes seem to correlate with the cosmic ray spikes that we seem to get on the the SDO, NASA's SDO charts.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of coupling there between the cosmic rays and the Schumann resonance, whenever that is.
I've got a very low flying something. Can you all hear it?
Yeah.
In the background?
No, I don't hear it.
No,
Okay.
I don't hear it.
Good, because it is super loud here. Well, this is exciting. Thank you for coming on Nox Mente, Nicole.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
This will be fun. So I already noted, and I noted from your bio earlier, that 2016 was a big year for you. And I want to get in there, but Nox Mente wants to get your foundation. So we want to know the house want to know about the house you built spiritually. So let's go way back and talk about you as far back as you can recall. What are the things that stand out to you now as far as early memories and things that fascinated you?
I was always fascinated with the sky. I loved looking at the stars as a kid. I would often go outside with my dog and look up at the stars and just wonder who's like looking back. But I really didn't have a lot of memories from my childhood that would have been psychic or intuitive, other than I'd love to look out my window and look up at the sky. Uh, but it was around the age of 17 is when I first started dabbling in spirituality. I was never a fan I was raised Catholic, and I was never a fan of the church. I've always been a little bit outspoken. Against authority. I've challenged authority my whole life. I know I've given my dad most of his gray hairs, but it's just one. I don't know. I was 12, and I just remember one day listening to the priest and thinking, "This is all a lie. I don't understand how an all-loving God would want to use fear to motivate his children." It just didn't fit right with me, and so I always started to look outside of the church for more answers.
How old were you when you realized it was a cannibalistic ritual going on?
Not until much later. That veil was not pulled until much later.
I love hearing that I call it the rebel gene, that you were actually questioning. And so many, and this is why I call it the rebel gene, because not everyone actually questions the narratives. They just go along with it for whatever reasons, and that's fine. But it's interesting. So at 17, although I do want to step back earlier and see what kind of pop culture influenced you, but at 17, when you started to really question stuff, what do you think sparked that, though? Were you just not getting the answers you were looking for?
Well, I had just gotten, when I was just before 2 months before my 17th birthday, I partook in a student exchange program in Switzerland. So I lived abroad not on my own. I lived with a family, but it was the first time I'd ever traveled without my parents. And I lived there for 3 months in the French speaking part of the country. And I had never, back then we didn't really have much of an internet. So I didn't know what to expect. It was like walking into a completely different world, and just being able to explore the different cultures and the different ways that people live their lives. And it was just very different. It really sparked a travel bug within me. But I remember they took me traveling so much. And I remember going to some really old churches through Europe, which was interesting to me because at first I didn't really want to go into the churches because just from what I grew up with, but I found that there was something different there. Like I really loved the history that was present in their architecture, and you could feel the age there more so than what you would feel over in North America. And so there was certain music that would be playing. And when I got back to Canada, I remember going into an HMV store, which was a CD store in Canada. And I remember going in to look for actually a pop CD. And I ended up finding Gregorian chants. And when I listened to them, I just knew right away that I had to get that CD home. And I started listening to it at home, and I'd listen to it when I was in the bath, and I listened to it when I was in bed. And I started meditating without even realize I was meditating. And I just remember the frequency that I was feeling, the way it made me feel and where it transported me was something I'd never felt before. It was a sense of peace that I really was wanting to create more of. And that really started to open things up for me. I was also really always interested in the body and interested in health. And so even at that time, I was starting to buy books on Chinese medicine. I was starting to buy stuff on natural health and vitamins, and really starting to explore stuff. And so I want to say that the Gregorian chants, interestingly enough, just because I wasn't fond of the church, but that it was that really kind of spoke to me. It was that, and then also the health industry that really kind of started to wake me up to what was going on.
This is you say so many incredible things here. I'm such a believer that one needs to get out of their nest, and earlier the better. That's why those exchange programs have always, I've thought, been great, because they do widen your world, and that's such an important thing. And you come back, and sometimes and then you're obviously still in school, but you've got a different perspective, a different worldview, and it changes things. So that in and of itself is important. I love hearing that. The Gregorian chants, I am so with you. Oh my God. Early on. And then I found like Hildegard von Bingen and all that good stuff. Okay, so with this, we're going to spring back to this, but I wanted to jump back in time again. As a little kid, was anything in pop culture sticking out? Like, did you like cartoons, or what kind of cartoons did you like in movies? Did you have a relationship with nature?
I loved nature. I grew up in the countryside more so than in like anything urban. And so my parents lived on always quite a bit of land, at least 2 acres. On one property that we lived, we had a huge forest. And I remember always going down there was a pond at the bottom, and I would always be playing with frogs and turtles and different things like that. I was always climbing trees. I loved being outside. As for like cartoons, I don't know why I remember watching this movie so many times. My mom every Friday night would rent us a movie of our choice, and me and my sisters would watch. And I just remember Winnie the Witch. I don't know why.
Oh, I love Winnie the Witch. Oh, that's funny. That's not, I mean, I think that seems right in line though.
I know, I'm only drawing that parallel in this moment.
That's awesome. Did your sisters like Winnie the Witch too?
Oh, it was like one of our favorites.
Yeah.
My mom used to get sick of us renting it. She's like, pick a different movie.
How many sisters what's the sibling situation?
So I'm the oldest of 4, and my brother is the youngest, and I have 2 sisters in between.
And I know this because of our pre-chat and all this, but you were born in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born just outside Toronto, Canada. And so my accent will come out in right there when I say out, about, house. Yes. But otherwise it's kind of hidden a little bit. But yeah, so I lived in Canada until I was 29. And then because of that travel bug, I moved down to the Cayman Islands and ended up living there for 9 years. And then I decided to move to Colorado, and that's where I currently am.
So you keep saying in the travel things there, and also education. So is Sag predominant in your chart?
You know what? I've got it in my moon.
Okay, well, there we go. And then your 9th house, what's that?
My 9th house is Sag.
Yeah, so there we go, girl. It all makes sense. Don't you find this with this?
No, actually, no, wait, I'm sorry. My 9th house is, no, wait, is it?
I have to look too. It's terrible being on the spot.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I want to say it is, because I'm a Taurus.
So, right. So then
it is. Yeah. Sagittarius is my 9th house. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Taurus sun, Sag moon. What's your rising?
Cancer.
Ooh, girl, I love this combo.
And then I've got Aries in my Mars and Venus. So I got quite a bit of fire in my chart. So I'm not your typical Taurus because I'm not really slow moving. I like fast action, speed, let's get it going kind of stuff. So
I'm a Taurus with Aries and Venus as well. So I relate to you. And that upfront, and there's that upfront kind of sexuality with all that too. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is I don't actually read that so much about myself, but people read that about me. I find, you know what I'm saying? I think that's something people perceive in me rather than me. I mean, it's
that sexy throaty voice of yours.
No, that's just from talking so much, Jerry. Like, I swear I sound like I'm on helium if I have a vocal break. Anyway, yeah, the astrology stuff's cool. That's interesting that we have some of that in common.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So, and always it always seems this way with I love Canadians. They all, even the city dwelling Canadians I've known, all seem to be really nature oriented. So,
You know what's so interesting is, okay, I grew up in the country, loved nature. And when I got into my teenage years, I couldn't wait to get out of it. Like I just wanted to get into the city so badly, and lived in the concrete jungle for a while until I moved down to the island. And it was after living on the island in a much slower paced life that when I finally came back to Colorado, I realized I can't do the city anymore.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, it was hurting my energy. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it just hurt. Like everything was too fast. I couldn't handle, like all the beeping horns and, just traffic in general. It just freaked me out a little bit way more than I ever realized it could be possible.
Yeah, me too. Every time I'm in a city, I feel it almost feels like I'm dying. It's hard. And part of that's the introvert in me, but a lot of it I really think is the empathic energies that it took me a long time to admit to.
Mm-hmm.
I was like one of those in the closet empaths. I know. I think I had this hangover with like being too flaky.
Oh,
And
really?
and you so know it's not. You know this, but
Mm-hmm.
I had to come. I never had a religious hangover. I had a new age hangover. Like it always triggered me for some reason. So I would steer clear of anything that might put me in those waters. I'm over that, but it was there for a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, understandably so. It's, I mean, I got made fun of a lot, and I got a lot of the rolling eyes, and learned pretty quickly that there were only certain things I could talk about with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get it.
So, and that kind of brings me to the next question, coming back to 17, when all this stuff started to kind of awaken in you. It was there always, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
so in this period when you're questioning things and you've gone to, it was Sweden, right?
Switzerland.
Switzerland, way different. And you've got the Gregorian chants going, and you're getting into body and health and all that. What do you think? So, where I'm going with this question is I'm trying to align it with what do you think was going on with your inner world that sparked this kind of major shift outwardly?
Well, like I said, I've always been someone who likes to go against the grain. If everyone's doing one thing, then I want to do the opposite. I don't like, even with my traveling locations, I didn't want to travel to places where I knew everyone was going. And so I'm like, I want to go somewhere where no one else is going that much, or no one else is really talking about. So I always want to go where people aren't typically going, or that's on trend, so to speak. And, you know, I would like to say that when I started to really open up to what was actually possible spiritually, happened through what I perceived originally as one of the most horrifying revelations that I could ever receive at the age of 20. And that was when I had just broken up with my first boyfriend, who I had a very abusive relationship with. Like, he was really emotionally abusive and mentally abusive as well. And took me a really long time to have enough confidence in myself to finally like break free of that relationship. But when I finally did, and I remember driving home from his house and getting back to my parents, where I was living at the time when I was in second year university. And I was sitting in the kitchen and the phone rang, and I picked up, and it was the health center where I had like a pap test. And they were calling me to let me know that there was an abnormality. And I kind of started to freak out, because he's the only person that I had ever been sexually active with. And and at the time there was not a lot of stuff about this, but they told me that I had HPV. And they also told me that some strains caused cancer. And of course, my mind goes straight to cancer and locks in like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I had this huge lump in my throat, just building and building and building. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, who's going to want to be with me now? I'm completely the worst thing that I could ever think happening, it happened to me, like through what I thought, like I had waited till I felt like I was in love with someone to sleep with someone. He was the first person I ever slept with. And so it was just this really terrifying moment. And I remember going to the kitchen. She just kind of like, oh, if you need anything, like call us, and just kind of hung up. And there was no one home at the time. And I sat down at the kitchen table, bawling my eyes out, just feeling absolutely sorry for myself. And I just think, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all of a sudden, I guess this would be the first time I actually received a message that I can remember. Was I had the image of a paper cutout that a friend had given me 6 months prior from a paper magazine. And it was a clipping to a applied kinesiologist, because I was studying kinesiology in university at the time, but this was applied kinesiology, which is much different. It's much more natural based and working with testing, muscle testing,
Yeah.
And so I looked at that thing and I looked and I was like, I don't know why, but I'm supposed to call this number. And so I called them right away, and the man answered, who was the applied kinesiologist. And he's like, I told him what was going on and how scared I was, and I didn't know what to do, but I just felt like I was supposed to call them. And he said, I think you need to talk to my wife. She's a naturopath. And so I ended up starting to see her, and I booked a session, and I walked in, and of course she had these massive crystals in her front hall. She worked out of her home in downtown Toronto, and there were all these different like essential oils, smells going through the place. And I was like, wow, like this place is awesome.
Yeah.
And so she brings me in, and within like 20 minutes of her getting me to talk to her, she's got me bawling my eyes out again. And I'm like, how did she just ask me one question and got to the heart of everything? And so with her, she started doing past life regression with me. She introduced me to past life regression. She started using different techniques. She did do muscle testing to test which oils to use on me. She told me that not to worry about the virus. She goes, the body is capable of eliminating any virus. It's just what we got to figure out why you're holding on to it. Mm-hmm. And so we went into past lives to figure out why I was holding on to it. And we did some past life work there. She did dolphin brain repatterning, which I can't even tell you exactly what that is, but she was tapping on my brain and doing all this other stuff. So she just totally opened my entire world to this stuff. And to her credit, within 6 months, I went back to the doctor and my tests all came back negative.
Yeah, of course.
Is it true that the dolphin consciousness is a fifth dimensional consciousness?
I actually think it's beyond.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I think I want to say 11, and I don't know why.
Cool.
I can't tell you why. That number is just coming into my mind. But yeah, so I was a student. I didn't make much money at all because I was studying, and I had then gone to massage therapy college. I left university to go to massage therapy college because I just knew university wasn't for me. And, but I knew that I had to see this woman every month. And so I saved up enough money to go to her. And I just remember leaving her place every time feeling like a completely different person, like I was transported somewhere else. And I was almost scared to drive home because I didn't understand like why I was feeling so kind of out of my body. Mm-hmm. So she was kind of like my first mentor and really started to open me up to things where I started meditating more. She taught me how to move energy through my body, how to take in light. She taught me a ton of stuff. So, which I have now used in some of my guided meditations on my website. So yeah, that was kind of where it really started to take off.
That's incredible. And really what a blessing so young at 20 to have, I always say that it's better to have the early house shakedown. It seems we adapt so much easier, but to get to the path led you to her, and she changed the trajectory, and here you are. I mean, this is amazing. Natural paths are where it's at for me. So just another one of those amazing healer stories. Are you still in contact with her?
I actually had lunch with her a couple years ago in Toronto. We met up, and it was really nice to connect with her again. But other than that, I haven't really had stayed in too much contact with her.
Yeah. Yeah. People come and go in such magical ways. And, that's one of the things that I love about naturopaths is they actually just want to get you back into that state of balance. They don't want forever patience.
Exactly. It's not about creating the codependent relationship like a lot of other systems are.
Yeah, especially if the allopath, the mainstream system wants you forever on it. So this story, we have these key ages. Let's look at your dream world and start tying that in. Were you a child? As a child, were you a dreamer, or what was your dream life like early on?
I have a very highly imaginative mind.
I was expecting to hear that.
Extremely imaginative. And so, yeah, my dreams were always very interesting. I don't have dreams that specifically stand out, but I do remember, I think, seeing things move in my room, like shadows and things. And I can't say that there was anything specific going on, but I always felt like I was able to communicate beyond here without ever actually feeling like I was. But I always had this sense that that was possible. And I think, I don't know, I think something's kind of shut down in me, which I've only recently discovered as to why. There's something really traumatic that happened to me at the age of 5. And I've only shared it to my my group in my AlcheME program, actually just this past weekend. And I'm going to be sharing it on my channel probably next week. I have this raw and real video series that I do, and I try to be as raw and authentic and real as possible and express certain things that, I feel very vulnerable to do so. And that's going to be my next one. But I think because of that, I kind of turned some things off. And so it's hard for me to remember certain things from my childhood, I think, in that context. But I definitely had a very strong imagination, which has become the biggest strength in my meditations and allowing me to kind of connect and see things. So my third eye has opened up quite vividly.
Yeah, I imagine with just the stuff you've shared already that it probably is there. So in the early part of your life, do you remember having any fears? And you know what I mean by the typical fears that kids have. So something in the dark or something under the bed, in the closet, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was always scared of monsters under the bed.
Yeah, I mean, that is so typical, and it's at least in Western society, it's so common.
Yeah, and yeah, I remember being scared. My father loved to scare us. And I remember for my 12th birthday, I had a bunch of girls over to the house and at night, and we had the forest in the back. And I was like, oh, let's go out into the forest. And I didn't know my dad was hiding out in the forest and then just started freaking us all out. And just shrieks of girls like screaming. We were at the top of a hill. It just went across the valley. Like I'm sure the entire neighborhood just heard. And so I'm easily scared. So here's the thing. Anyone who knows me and has watched even a movie of any scary semblance in it whatsoever knows I jump. I jump off my chair when something's scary. So I stopped watching really scary movies. Like I just won't. It's pretty bad when Scooby-Doo is a cartoon that scares you when they go into the fog. So I've always been kind of freaked out about that. And I think it's because I have such an impressionable mind. My mind, when I see something that freaks me out, I can't get the image out of my head. And so I know how strongly we can be programmed that way. And so I have to just, it's kind of, I think, a protective mechanism for me to keep that stuff out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. You wouldn't
Jerry?
be scared if it wasn't for you pesky kids. Never mind. It was a Scooby-Doo joke.
I was like, wait, okay, Jerry
I
Huh?
dude. So, all right, so you have this situation, this trauma happened at 5, which people can tune in to your blog, to your show and find out later when you divulge that. What about later on? When did you start, around what age did you start developing dreams that you could recall and then possibly navigate or at least discern a dreamscape within?
Probably not until around 2016 when I was heavily meditating.
Oh my God. Wow. That's a huge jump.
Yeah. Like I mean, I've always been a vivid dreamer, but I didn't have anything that really stood out for me. Some things kind of turned on, like when I got my Reiki attunement, I think I was about 28 and I got my Reiki attunement. The night I got attuned, I had the craziest experience happen to me. And it's probably one of the very few what I would call negative entity experiences I've had. And it was, I remember lying in bed and getting awoken because I had this really crazy swishing energy going through my sacral and about my sacral chakra. And it was just swirling and swirling and swirling. And I just remember waking up going, what is going on there? Like, what's happening? And it just started getting more and more powerful. And I felt like I was almost in a vortex. And I don't know why, but I got the sense that there was some sort of snake entity in my room. And it was really freaking me out. And I didn't see it, but I kept getting this image and understanding. And I just thought, I don't know what this is, but I want it to shut down right now. And I threw the covers over my head because I reverted to being like a child. And it just all of a sudden stopped. It's like all the energy went out of the room and it was gone. And so that kind of freaked me out a little bit and I didn't know what to do. And it kind of caused me to want to pull back a little bit because I couldn't understand, like I didn't know anything about that kind of stuff back then, like we didn't really have much YouTube back then. I mean, it was just kind of starting, I think. I don't know. It was like, that must have been 2005. It happened.
I think YouTube started around that time.
Yeah.
So what do you think that was? It was some kind of Kundalini experience?
It may have been. I just felt like, I don't know, like I felt like something was trying to feed off of my energy. And I can't explain, like I know it sounds crazy.
Well, it sounds like Kundalini.
But like I have actually had a really intense Kundalini experience when I was 31. Where I was certain I was levitating.
So, and with having that Kundalini experience later, so that you can pull upon that, you definitely are making a separation here between the two.
I mean, I was scared in both instances, but for different reasons. The other one, the first time, I really felt like there was something that was there that wasn't supposed to be. It was uninvited. And the second time, the energy was so intense, I thought I was going to burst into 1,000 pieces. Like I thought I was going to explode.
So I want to talk about that second one, but I want to finish up with this first one. The second one was, you said you were 31?
Yes.
Okay. But this negative one, so let's parse out just kind of like the the basic stuff. Was there anything going on in your life besides Saturn return that was crazy or unsettling? Were you not stable? Any of that stuff?
It was very not too far away from me finally making a huge decision to leave Toronto and move down to the Cayman Islands. I was starting to become very discontent with living in the city, living in Canada in general. And also I was going through what I would call part of a dark night. Oh, I would actually no, it was a very dark night of the soul I was going through. I had been broke. So I went through a relationship breakup when I was 26. And it wasn't until a year and a half later when I started to really go into a dark hole over it all. And I was using alcohol to numb my pain. So I was going out and partying a lot in the nightclubs. I was drinking a lot, and I would use men to I was kind of like a black widow. I would lure men in and like be really seductive and talk to them and make them think that I was interested in them. And then I just tear them apart.
It's so Aries and Venus. I had that period too. And
what's even worse is that I started to get really verbally abusive towards my best friends, my girlfriends. And it wasn't until they finally confronted me. They're like, Nicole, we got to sit you down. And I'm like, what? And they started telling me of this. And I started to realize I think I might have a problem here that I'm really avoiding. And so I decided to stop drinking. And I gave up alcohol, and I said, and part of it was also like just wanting to make my body healthier, but also I knew like something's going on here and I'm not going to figure out what it is if I keep drinking. So I was just really ashamed of my behavior, and I didn't like the person I was becoming. In fact, I was really hating the person I was becoming. And when I did that, I had already made the decision. It wasn't too far off me to making the decision to move to the Cayman Islands. So I was getting ready to really make a huge move that I didn't know was going to impact me in the way that it did. And I just knew that the city was unhealthy for me, the whole lifestyle, the friend group that I had, as nice of people as they are, they were just really into that party scene. And I just was really feeling a need to completely pull myself out of it. And so that's when that was that was going on when that experience happened in my bed.
Yeah, I can see a connection there. And there's so much to be said for what that could have been. So when you experienced it, did it have a sense? I want to talk about it in specific now. So did it feel like it had a sentience to its own? It was in there. It was basically going to feed on you, correct? I mean,
it felt something separate, like from me. Now I had some energy going on in my body, but what I felt present in my room wasn't attached to that. So it was a different energy in the room on top of what I was feeling going on in my body.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was going through a major activation, and this thing was trying to like interfere or latch on in some way to feed off.
When you think about it now, are you able to pull up colors with it or like other descriptives?
Other than a snake with fangs.
Yeah.
I can't really and like this slithery kind of a feeling, like just kind of sneaky slithering in through the back door kind of a feeling.
Real low.
I can't help but think about Randy Green talks about how everyone has some kind of snake thing put into them when they come to this realm.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And perhaps your Reiki experience cleansed that from you, and that's what you saw or perceived.
Oh, so maybe it wasn't happy that it got kicked out?
No, correct. It was angry.
It got exhumed.
That's a possibility. I never even looked at it that way.
Well, it's all parasitical. And so, it, as I always say, it just wants to live. So just like everything else, but it wants back, these things want back, and
Mm-hmm.
they get become stronger by feeding. So it's very synchronistic, and it totally fits in with that Randy Green stuff, which is fascinating. Did you, what was, okay, so, and then before we move on, what was your relationship, had your relationship been with just the symbol of snakes in general, and snakes in general, like in the physical realm?
I mean, I didn't like them so much, but at the same time, I wasn't terrified of them. I also did know that there were some different meanings of snakes, because also, here's the other thing that I haven't mentioned. In my mid 20s, while I was living downtown, I would get these hits, I guess, intuitive hits to go to the bookstore and get a book. And I wouldn't know, like, I'm like, okay, I feel like, I guess I want a new book. And I never went there with the intention of picking a specific book out, but letting the book pick me. And really found, okay, one day I found myself picking up a Mayan book. And this was back in 2004, 3, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reading about the Mayan culture and the Mayan calendar more specifically. And I know that the serpent was very important in their culture, and like the Quetzalcoatl, right?
Yes.
So I knew that there was also like these incredibly powerful spiritual attachments to the snake that were also present in my mind. So I didn't have like always just a negative perception of snake, but it wasn't purely positive.
Yeah. That it's an interesting, I mean, it's just an interesting symbol. I had to come to terms with, I ended up loving them, but I had a huge fear of them for a long time in my childhood. And I still do if they're big and scary. I don't care what anyone says. Sorry, not having it. Okay, so I want to juxtapose that with your Kundalini now, which is just a few years later, post Saturn return. You're in the Cayman Islands now.
Well, actually, I left my job in the Cayman Islands to take a 1-year sabbatical off work and travel.
Oh, girl, look at you. I have a whole map here.
The Cayman Islands, I moved to the Cayman Islands and was there for 1.5 years. And within that 1.5 years, I realized that I just wanted to go on like a sabbatical. Like I just felt my soul calling it. And the Cayman Islands really opened me up to a lot more of my feminine energy, which I had suppressed my entire life. And so I was really starting to go a lot deeper into my spiritual journey. And I decided to backpack through Costa Rica for a couple of months on my own. And the first place I went was the Vipassana, which is the 10-day silent meditation retreat. And so I learned the meditation protocol for that, where I had an incredible experience there. But fast forwarding 6 months later, I'm taking now my yoga teacher's training. And one day in that yoga teacher's training, one of the guys who was in my program, he's like, "Oh, you did the Vipassana. Do you want to do meditation with me this afternoon?" I said, "Sure." So him and I went in, and we were sitting about 5 feet away from one another, and we're meditating. And as I'm meditating, I'm really getting into it, and I'm following the protocol, and I start to feel this energy at the base of my spine starting to move and build, like building in intensity and moving in like a very spiralized kind of motion. And at the same time, I see in my third eye, I can see inside my spine all of this white light. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm just allowing myself to go with it and explore it. And the light and energy starts to move upwards out of my root chakra into my sacral, and it continues to move up. And as it's moving up into my sacral, into my solar plexus, I am feeling like I am no longer sitting on the floor. And in my mind, I'm like, "Nicole, this is just crazy. Of course you're still sitting on the floor." But I'm like, but it really doesn't feel like I'm sitting on the floor anymore. And I felt like my body was levitating. And I didn't want to open my eyes because I didn't want to like prove myself right or wrong and then break the connection. Like I was like, okay, ego, you don't need to do that right now. Like it doesn't matter. And I continued to allow it to move up. And as it got to my heart chakra, the energy was so intense. It felt like the energy was going to rocket out of my brain and my whole head was going to explode and my chest was going to explode open. And it was really starting to freak me out. Like I really thought my whole body was going to explode. It was so intense that I had to open my eyes and just shut it all down because I was like, I don't know what's going on here right now. And so that was like my first really intense Kundalini experience where I had to stop it because it was so intense.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you say this because so many people, it was terrifying to me actually when it first started happening. And as it would move through, it took me a while, by the way. And it seems like I hear so many stories where people just seem to like, I guess, smoothly go through it. And it was, I guess nothing's for me has been smooth because
no, I don't know if I actually haven't heard anyone speak of it in a smooth way, although I haven't heard too many people speak about it, but yeah, no, it's 100% terrifying.
Yeah, I thought for me, especially when we start getting in the heart and stuff, I thought I was actually having like cardiac arrest. So it scared, like it gave me that kind of scare. Like when I first got out of my body, I thought that those first times, and sometimes here and there, still, I'm still like, oh man, I think I may have died, you know? And so it's just one of those survival things that I can't seem to kick. And so it pops up, even though I'm able to do these things. Now it's been a long practice, but again, I've been working a long time at this.
Yeah. It's, it's interesting. I know why I had to stop it at my heart because I was about to go through one of the biggest heart opening years of my life. And my heart had been closed down for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so, this was all about me, opening myself up, opening my heart, exploring vulnerability, exploring a softer side of myself, and beginning the path towards self-love. That's where it all started, actually, was that year, 2008, when I went on that sabbatical.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was more about, more about forgiving others for causing pain and taking it in. And that's the beauty. If no one's worked on themselves, they don't understand how these things are magical like this. And the journey, I highly suggest it. So it makes sense. Was this part of that revelation that happened in realizing what your trauma was when you were 5?
Mm-mm.
That's later.
That didn't surface for me until October of this year.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's a never-ending journey, I tell you. Just when I think I can't be surprised anymore, it's just like, wow, we're going to go there now.
Yeah. It's strange. I reached out to Randy Moggins because I started to have some crazy dream memories pop up. And I started to realize that these things I thought were dreams this whole time that were so vivid were actually cover. Whatever, if it's my ego covering it, my protective self, if it's a basis for, whatever, they were covering a reality that I was not able to fully see. So, I mean, I think we work through this stuff continually.
Oh, absolutely. It is constant.
And thankfully so, come on now. This is, at this point, this is part of the joy in this realm for me.
Oh my gosh, you don't come here to be complacent and sit on and couch surf and watch TV and eat bonbons.
No.
That's not why we're here. So yeah.
No, especially if you have I have a T-square in my chart. So I'm wondering you might have one too, though. It sounds like our charts are very similar. So tell me about your dream world in general, though, about how you experience lucidity. What does the dreamscape look like to you? Do you experience it in high color, high def, sensate? Can you read all those little juicy details?
That's interesting. I don't know about reading, but I guess I can. Well, because I'm just thinking of a dream right now where when it must have been early 2017, and I was sleeping. And so this happened in a dream. And I remember dreaming I was on this bed with another girl. I think we were just kind of hanging out on a bed and just chatting, like girl talk kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, I started getting a message in, and it was, they were saying, "We are the guardians, and we have a message for you." And I just thought, I remember in my dream going, oh my God, like I'm being contacted, and it was one of my first contacts actually. And so I'm hearing them say that we are the guardians, but then all of a sudden their voice went underwater. Like it sounded like it got all underwater and I couldn't hear them. And
Dolphins.
And so I remember telepathically, of course, this is all happening telepathically, but at the same time, I audibly heard them in my dream. So, and I don't usually get audible messages. It's always telepathic. And so I said, can you please send me the message another way? I can't hear you. And I had an iPad in front of me or a tablet of some sort. But so I looked at the tablet and all of a sudden it started typing a message on the tablet from them. And it looked like the old computer DOS style, like type, like that green DOS type.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it just said something along the lines of stay away from Obama ads. And I thought, oh, what the hell does that mean? Because I wasn't really a very political person at all. And I just was like, okay. And I woke up and I remember I wrote it down and I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? And so I then have another meditation where I am in meditation with Archangel Michael. And he gives me another similar message to stay away from like political stuff. And I thought, well, I'm not really political. So why are they telling me this? Like what's going on? And also I'm not really one into like paying attention to what's going on in media that much, in a sense of like, I didn't know what movies were out. So I didn't know, like, I think Guardians of the Galaxy was playing, but I didn't know, like, I don't pay attention to any of that stuff because I really stopped paying attention to Hollywood a while ago.
It's a really good movie though.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So fast forward a couple days and it became very clear as to why I got that message. I guess this was just around Trump's inauguration. And, this was also the time of the Women's March and all of that. And I just remember getting this sense of like, oh no, this isn't right. Something's wrong here. And I felt like the Women's March was being used against actually women. It was attacking their actual femininity. And I didn't know why I felt that way. And I wasn't a Trump supporter. I wasn't a Hillary. I wasn't an anything supporter at the time, but I just remember getting this message or feeling of that. And so I wrote a post and I saw all this hatred online of like people just absolutely hating Trump. And I just thought, wow, from everything that I know about energy and how we use our energy, that if we want to solve a problem, the last thing you want to do is put more hate into the problem, right? Because that's only going to like make it worse. And so I put out this post, which I never do, hence why I think I was given the message, and not saying like no way, shape or form saying like I'm aligned with Trump or anything like that. Just saying, hey, like, why don't we just wait and see what he does? But in the meantime, like, let's not spread the like the hatred and use the energy in a better way. That was the gist of my post. Oh my Lord. My phone battery drained so fast. My Facebook was going off the hook. I had over 200 comments on that post and I didn't know what to do. And I had people who were family, like immediate family members. I had friends who I felt like were family to me, who had known me for a very long time, who just were attacking me for putting out that kind of a post. And it really red pilled me to how intolerant people can get to other perspectives if it's not in agreement with them.
Yep.
And I didn't understand how people were attacking me when they knew me so well. They knew my character to know that I wasn't any of the things, like my mental stability was being questioned by people I love, worried for my mental health. And it tore me up. I was crying. I was so upset over it. And
do you see now how that was a psychic attack?
Oh yeah.
From the NPCs?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And it really opened my eyes up, and I became very politically aware after that. I started researching. I started diving in. Now, I understand why I was told to stay away from Obama ads, but at the same time, the good that came out of it was because it really red pilled me to start getting interested in media, but not mainstream media, but independent journalists, and understanding like how media is used against us, and just really red pilling myself through that. And so taking, I guess, the journey of spirituality to all of seeing where all the deception lies, and how the truth is made to be a lie and the lies are made to be truth.
Yeah, this is a big deal. And I can echo that too. I always say neutral, and you cannot even, when dealing with social engineering, neutrality is just as bad to anyone that is being played and on a side. You're just as, you fall into whatever enemy camp they are not in, and it's a huge psychic attack. But look at how many people now have been able to stand back and start to see how this red pilled a lot of people that were coming from a reasonable stance, saying, let's not be reactive. Let's stand back and see how this plays out. And this is that's just the micro, right? Because this is a way bigger situation. That's, we could just blow this up into all the heavens. This is like a gigantic cultural stepping stone towards something. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely there if you want to ride the wave and look at things from a broader perspective. So that it makes me happy to hear this.
Yeah. And I know we totally went off track on the dreamscape and everything, but that's kind of where it all took me. It's amazing how that one dream, kind of foreshadowed a little bit. And, yeah.
Well, with that, so, there's a lot of that dream that sounds very precognitive to me. And, and some of the focus people would call it a little bit of dreaming true because of the pathway in which it played out. Is this something that you experience now within your in context to the dream experience? Are you able to tap into timelines and
yes,
deja vu and all that?
Yeah, I'm experiencing. I've had some dreams where I know I'm working in a completely different timeline than the one I'm currently in this reality that we're all talking in right now.
Give us more on this. This is stuff we'd love to talk about on Nox Mente.
I remember one dream in particular that I had in the last year or so. And I was working with this person, like someone close to me. And it was very bizarre, this dream, because it was like do you know how they have on stage when they're showing something on stage and it's just one spotlight and everything's black around and all you see is what's in this one spotlight? And it was like, this person and I were in this spotlight and darkness was all around us. And this person was going through an awakening and asking me all these questions. And I knew that this person wasn't yet awakened in this reality. And I just remember waking up out of that going, oh my God, I feel like I just saw another timeline. And lo and behold, I'm now working with that person and they're going through a major awakening. And so that happened about probably a year, maybe 8 months to a year before the awakening actually started. And I remember distinctly feeling like that was not just a dream. I was definitely in another timeline, but it was like, gosh, I want to say, it felt like, because we were in such a dark space, I want to say we were somewhere in between timelines. It's almost like a collapsing part, like it was in the verge of a collapse, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where would you rate your lucidity level in that?
Well, I am yet able to actually control myself in dreams, like control a dream and make it do what I want. I'm trying to work with that right now. But the vividness of my dreams is extremely high def. And I always feel like I'm living in it.
Yeah, that is, well, okay. So you feel like you're living in it, but you're aware, correct? I mean, you're aware that you're in there, and
So, yeah, sometimes I'm aware, sometimes I'm not.
okay.
But I know that in my dreams, I'm becoming more and more aware now of me being in them and being like, oh yeah, this is different, and kind of like looking around, and I'm starting to come to the thing like, no, I don't want to do this actually.
Yes.
Why am I doing this? I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I somehow wake myself up out of it so that I don't end up doing it.
Oh, that's interesting. So, at any point in your life, have you had an OBE? So, and I want to state, because some of the stuff with your Kundalini experience, especially, for me, when I was young and I was my etheric body, or whatever you want to call it, that was moving in and out and swelling and getting smaller and all this, was my first experience with that. And I didn't know that was actually part of the process until way later. And so it was hard to categorize it because I didn't know. But with the language you're using around your Kundalini experience, the first round with it is definitely that same kind of experience that is generally connected to getting out of your body, actually really just getting out of your body. So you already have, just from that account, the little bit I know. Has this happened though in technically the dream state for you?
Where I'm outside of my body,
Your
looking down.
Yes, or just out. No, you're out. So, which is different than being in the dream and lucid. It's like there's just a slight shift in consciousness there.
I've had times where I'm I'm in a dream, but I feel like I'm viewing it.
Like omniscient in a way, like they're like
Almost like I'm remote viewing, but in dream.
Ooh, yes.
Like it's a movie, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when those experiences are happening, give us, like, walk us through. It doesn't have to be a specific dream, but walk us through how you experience that. Well, like, and this, a lot of the stuff I look for that I think gets overlooked is the emotion aspect. So a lot of people, I don't know why, and so I always just remind people to bring in the emotion stuff because it's there, it's at play.
Yeah, I definitely feel a lot of emotion in my dreams. Like a lot. I'm very emotionally connected in my dreams. And sometimes that's great for obvious reasons. And sometimes it's not, because I'm terrified. So I'm definitely emotionally connected. The dream world for me has just been something that's I've been tracking a lot of my dreams over the last few years, and I feel like some of them have been precognitive, but it's only in the last probably 6 months or so that I'm starting to feel very, like you said, that I'm feeling like I'm viewing things, or I'm aware that I'm in the dream, and I'm a lot more aware of what's going on around me. I tend to have a lot of spy mission dreams where I'm on mission and I'm trying to either save someone or extract information.
I totally have the same kind of dreams. That's
Do
so
you?
weird.
It's remind me of Jerry.
Yep.
Do you have military in your family at all?
No, I don't. Well, my papa, who's passed away, my mother's father, he did work in the Navy down in India, outside of India, like for the British Navy. But as a child, though, I guess, I don't know, like it wasn't anything, like I always hated war movies, but now like I'm just finding myself much more intrigued in military than ever before.
What is intriguing you?
Just this idea of fighting for something, like this idea of battling evil, or like some sort of, like the camaraderie, this idea of knowing that you're on a team that completely has your back, or you're fighting with people who would die for you. That kind of honor and that kind of trust that I think is kind of lacking a lot in our society right now. I'm very intrigued by that, but then I'm also intrigued by the programming that happens and how people are programmed to be in the military, and just what the military is used for. It's just, I grew up in Canada, so I have to say military was never a big aspect of my life. It's only since I've been living in the States more that I've become much more interested in it. Because I now see the value, where I used to be very like anti-military. I used to be like, very naive in this idea of like, well, we shouldn't have wars and all that. And of course, we don't want to have wars. No one wants wars, but sometimes you have to fight for something that's being taken from you. And if you want your freedoms and your sovereignty, then you have to fight for it. And so kind of losing some of my naivety, and also my own programming that I went through. I think that was programmed through me through school.
Yeah.
But
well, psychologically, especially like in Jungian psychologically, the idea of boundaries is paramount. And you have to fight for your boundaries. So many people have to learn how to say no, and also yes in the right ways, like from a real sense of knowing yourself, and not being walked over or doing things you don't want to do. And that's just on a personal level. And if we just push that out, it makes sense in the outer world that our boundaries are a big deal. And if there's something that wants to bowl you over or doesn't like you, and you don't have a good set of boundaries, you're not going to survive. And so this is in the outer world. This makes complete sense with fighting for things you believe in, fighting for a right to say, I believe in my ability to take up space, whatever it is. So yeah, it's interesting how the programming in the outer world in some places is trying to eradicate this idea. It's psychologically, it's not very healthy.
No, and I think that's actually one of the pitfalls of the spiritual community, is this idea of we're all one, so we shouldn't have boundaries kind of thing. And it'll remove our connectedness if we have boundaries. And that's not true at all. It's a huge misinterpretation of what boundaries are.
Yes.
And so, as an empath, it's so important that you maintain your boundaries.
Oh,
And it's
yes.
also, interestingly enough, a massive act of self-love to enforce your own boundaries. And if you're not enforcing your own boundaries, then you're actually going against what the acts of self-love actually are. And so this was like a huge lesson for me in understanding the importance of maintaining your own individual sovereignty while you're part of a collective, and knowing that there are certain rights that you need to maintain in order to, like you said, maintain your own sovereignty and your own health, and or you are not going to survive, like you said.
Well, and I always try to bring these things down into easier ways for people to see them, because it seems like if we push it into the outer world, people just get triggered so easily these days. But I mean, what about in our blood cells, the hemoglobin? Everything has its own little,
Mm-hmm.
Everything has its own protective layer. The heart does, everything does. And this is how the body functions. And it needs to be this way.
Yeah, like I understand, like for instance, the wall triggers a lot of people. And a lot of people are like, well, that's just all about disconnecting us from things. But in reality, when you look at it, the cell wall is very important. And when the cell wall loses its integrity, nutrients can't get in and toxins can't get out.
Right.
And this is what happens. And that's how the disease starts to set in into the body. And so you absolutely have to maintain proper cell wall function. And I've studied cells. Actually, I studied live cell microscopy. So I would look at blood cells under a dark field microscope, and I would see what the blood looks like when the cell walls are losing their integrity. And it's not good. Like that's what sick people look like. And
Right.
so when you take these micro examples and take it to the macro, a wall doesn't necessarily mean that you're disconnecting from someone, or that you're preventing anyone, like you're trying to cut off a connection. It's about understanding that everything has its place and boundaries, and they need that in order to work cohesively. So in order for the body to survive, your red blood cells must maintain an integral cell wall. Your skin is also a layer, considered a wall against like the outside world versus your own internal world. It's the first line of defense that you have, but it's also like the last one on the way out of the body. And so I think, the ego can play a lot of tricks on us. And at the end of the day, you're either connected or you're not. And an exterior thing isn't going to mean you're not connected. Like I'm very connected to all my cells, and they all have walls, and they talk to me and we communicate. And I'm like, okay, you're not happy. We got to fix something. I'm like, maybe I need to do some juicing. And there are other ways. And we should know this in the spiritual community, that there is no time or space boundaries, and at the same time, the ego can get us tripped up when we see this idea of the wall, and not understanding that it's part of boundaries to make sure that everything works efficiently. It's not that anything is not allowed in or out, but it's that there's got to be a system in place so that everything works in a certain order.
Absolutely. It's a great metaphor. And it just always reminds me of the whole inner, outer, above, below, that whole sacred paradigm of finding a sense of balance. And it's hard to, and this is at the core of so much with dreaming. Everything that's going on in the outer world is yes, in part you're seeing your own content, and it's projected outward, but everyone else's content is out there too. And so we're all trying to parse through, and this idea of a sealed vessel in alchemy, of boundaries in psychology, of battle lines, of a house and a yard and a fence. And I mean, this idea is everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's become weaponized against us. And that's where we start looking at, what are these lowly energies? What is this kind of mind parasite that's setting in with social programming, that is like Solaris Blue Raven talks about, understanding about, you know, your dreams are getting hacked now. Dreams aren't even a sacred space because of all of the
Fuckery.
I don't even want to. I'm trying so hard to avoid words that just have become almost impossible to use these days.
But the other thing is, we don't know how long this has been going on. It could be, it always has been, you know.
I think it's always been at play, and now it's just it's a deeper program running, and so it's hard to navigate this territory. But it definitely ties into what we talk about here, which is namely the inner world, and how we're navigating the inner world, and how it's at play with the outer world. And so and so with this, let's transition into the idea of, when you experience others in your dreams that are not you, that are clearly pushing back and they're not part of your inner workings, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you experience them? And this can include the dead. This can include whatever. It's just other entities that are not you, that have a sentience to themselves or an autonomy in the dream plane. So in your dreams.
So what's the question exactly? Like, how do I relate to them, or?
Yeah. Do you experience them? And you did with the first snake. So we already know that you do, but I wanted to extend that out to maybe people, you know, that have died, or astral entities that are out there other than that first snake experience, dead animals you may have encountered, also possibly ETs, any of that other stuff that's not you, but that's at play when you go to sleep and dream.
Oh yeah, I experience it all. I'm not okay. I shouldn't say it all. I I didn't want to say dead people, like people who've passed on, but that's not true exactly.
Right. I don't believe in that either, but at least everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I've had an experience last year, I guess, because it's now January, where I was on a ship, and I was with other beings on that ship, but I couldn't tell you who they were, what they were. I remember
spaceship or cruise ship?
Yeah, no, a spaceship. I was out way, way, way out there in the galaxies.
Wait, were you on a mission? Because I have those same kind of dreams, and I'm wondering if we're like on the same.
Yes, I was on a mission.
Yeah.
And I was in this, it was more of like a round ship, but it did have a bit of a pointed front. And I remember being on the ship and feeling like I was on mission, and they were talking about how we were getting close to a very Earth-like planet, but it wasn't Earth. And so, but then all of a sudden there was a freak out happening. And there was all of this oil debris starting to form on the windows that I was able to look out of. And when they were trying to like remove it, which I can't tell you exactly how they were trying to remove it. It's not like they had windshield wipers or anything like that. But I remember seeing the streakiness of it. And I just remember that I remember thinking we're in some sort of Milky Way type area. And so when I woke up, I was telling a friend of mine the dream, and she like immediately looked up and sent me this like from the Science Journal or Live Science, I can't remember what it was, talking about this gaseous oil substance only found in the Milky Way, and how like it's when it like lands on something, it's a very slick kind of oily type texture. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know it was possible to have that out in space. Like and so I clearly was somewhere in my dream. Like that wasn't a dream. That was actually happening. And I have a friend of mine who's a mentor, and he's very, he's probably the most consciously evolved person I've ever met in my entire life. And sometimes when he talks to me about stuff, I feel like I'm in kindergarten spiritually. Like I really feel like I'm a newbie and that I haven't been doing any of this my entire life. And he's told me there are thousands of Earth-like planets around us. And he's told me a lot of things that I really want to talk about, but some of it I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about, because every time I'm with him, we're followed by people. And so, yeah. So,
okay. So wait, I want to pause on that. And would you give us some of that? Because I'm hearing more of this from people, and then, I have my own experiences. So when you're tapping into these subjects and then you start noticing these synchronicities in the outer world where it seems like, what are you experiencing when you say you feel like you're being followed by people? And are you experiencing any kind of like hybridish type experience out in the collective recently?
what do you mean by hybridish?
Well, human, not human, mixes, all that kind of stuff.
No to that, but being followed is because literally seeing people in SUVs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, because my friend has a way of tracking the plates, they then find out that, they were government.
And that is, this is good. It's good. It's good to hear. I like to hear stories like this because it makes people that are having these experiences not feel so alone. This stuff's very isolating. And I think it can be, if you allow it, it can be a scary thing. And if we stay in your agency, right, and self, and there's a good way to stay present where you don't allow the fear to feed upon itself, or also who knows what's being targeted at you. But what specific subjects are bringing this activity on? Is it just the galactic stuff?
It's just him anytime. And it happens to him all the time. And so whenever I'm out with him, there's always someone sitting near us who's by themselves, and I pick them out. I've seen them at coffee. I've seen them at a bar, several bars that we've been to, or restaurants. And I'm like, that person over there. And he's like, he goes, I've been watching. And so the question, and it's just the stuff, like, it always happens. It's never not happened. Let's just put it that way. It's never not happened that there's been someone following us or tracking us or hanging out really close to us to listen to what we're saying.
Oh man, Nicole, I would love to talk with him if you could.
I'm trying to get him on my podcast. I will
even
say
privately, just privately.
Yeah. He's very private. He's, I can talk to him when I see him again, but, he's very private, very selective about who he shares things with, only because of the nature of everything that he's able to see and do. It's beyond anything I've ever heard before. And, so I will let you know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, do. I mean, one of the reasons I came forward was I had to stop being private. It was paramount that I step forward. So that's why I did 2.5 years ago. But I value privacy and I understand it 100%. And so that's what I'm saying. I just like, if it's possible, let me know. So on that note though, back to when you're dreaming and you're experiencing other autonomous things, is there a full gamut of them? So is there a range of where they feel friendly to where they don't feel friendly? What?
Oh, yeah. And there's times where I know I'm being deceived. There are times where I know I'm being deceived. They're coming in as something they're not.
Could you give us an example of that?
I've had them like take on bodies of people I care about and trust, and I can just instantly feel like it's not them. Like I know something's off.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm trying to be deceived into doing things that I wouldn't want to do, like in this reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. That's definitely happening to me in the dream world state. I've definitely had other entities approach me in dreams that are benevolent. So I'm having that experience. I am experiencing other planets.
Experience other planets. Do the planets have a sentience like Earth does? I'm assuming you think I think Earth has a sentience. I think it's a living thing. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other planets have the celestial bodies have that as well when you experience them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. What and so what about also okay, so before I move on in there, I have so many questions for you now. That just opened up this huge floodgate. What about the dead? So have you had dreams precog of people you know that were going to pass? And again, we already established that idea of like what death is and isn't possibly. And but have you had precog dreams before someone is transitioned out, or contact with them soon after?
No, not in the dream state, but I have had precog on death in this this reality. Where someone I know, someone close to them was going to pass, and I knew it instantly, and I had it pegged down to within 2 weeks of when it happened.
Oh, that's remarkable. And so, and you'd mentioned your papa, and that's your mama's father.
Yeah, my mom's dad.
Did he? So has he returned in your dreams at all?
No, the person who actually contacts me is my dad's mom. And it's my dad's side of the family that I get my more intuitive psychic abilities. My aunt and my cousin have it. My aunt gets a lot of activity from those who've passed on, like moving things in the house and all of that kind of stuff, and contacting her and sending her messages, as well as my cousin. I don't get that as much, although I did have my grandmother reach out to me in like where she was tapping my shoulder. She was behind me, and I had seen her come out of a closet while my cousin, this was in the summer, my cousin who was my age and my sisters and we were in the bedroom, we were in a bedroom at the cottage, and we were all kind of like trying to call on, we're like, oh, let's talk to someone. We're like, oh, let's talk to Grandma Ann. And I never met her. She passed away 3 months before I was born. But I've always had a very strong connection to her that I haven't been able to explain otherwise. I just know when she's around, and I know I just know when she's there. And so when we were kind of like playing around, not realizing as kids like what we were doing, all of a sudden I saw someone come out of the closet. And you know how things are out of the corner of your eye. Like you can't see. As soon as you go to look dead on, it's gone. Yeah. And so I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, oh my God, did you see that? And my cousin saw it. She started freaking out. And so of course, like all these little girls are like screaming our heads off when we run downstairs, and my mom and my aunt are like, what's going on? And so we were just freaking out. And then so I decided, let me just kind of like chill myself out. And I was in the kitchen. I'm like, I'm going to wash some dishes. And so I was washing some dishes, and all of a sudden I felt like someone tapping on my shoulder from behind me. And I was certain, like, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to look because they're going to start talking to me. And then no one started talking, and I felt the tap again. And so I turned around and no one was in the kitchen. And I just knew it was my grandmother. And I just was like, okay, well, this is enough for me right now. And I just stopped dish. I just went where everyone else was. So I've had contact in that way with her. Although I do know when my grandparents are around, although I can't remember dreams with them specifically on my mom's side. It's my grandmother that I am mostly connected to, despite ever not meeting her in this lifetime.
Yeah, I find that, I always find that interesting because it does tie you to a line and energy. And then there's so much there to chew on as well, because there are people that there's a whole line of thought where the ones that have gone before us in lines of families that you have that were dead before you arrived are somehow energetically part of you that's not genetic. That's like another part of you that's moved in again in this dimension. And so there's just so much good stuff there to ponder. Uh, I'm wondering also, so I'm just going to wrap this section up. I wanted to talk a little bit about possession and my idea of it. But what are your thoughts on death?
I mean, it's it's really just a transition. And it's interesting because I'm fascinated with scorpionic energy. Death is very much is a transformation. And of course, like with my AlcheME program, like that's just exploring that whole concept and that idea of transformation. And so this idea of death, I mean, from a very human level, because we feel so much, of course it's sad, but then of course there's that part of you that knows they're not really gone. It's just the body that is leaving. And I don't know, it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, that it is.
Like, I'm always interested in people who've had like near-death experiences, and
yes,
their experience when they're deciding whether or not to come back or to continue on. And also the sort of information you can be given in a near-death experience that then helps you in your current life and completely changes you forever. But I feel like also you can look at death on a biological level in our bodies, but I feel like I've died a couple times. Like, I've transformed myself and rebirthed myself a couple times in this lifetime already. And so it's an interesting phenomenon. It just depends on what reality you're kind of looking at it from.
Yeah, well, that's why I ask everyone this. I mean, I talk a lot about it. It's just interesting to hear how people process that particular idea, really. So one of the things I wanted to get to, and when I was looking at checking you out before the show had started, this was one, and it's something I'm onto right now, but this idea of possession. And so strip yourself of the Christianized idea, especially the Catholic idea of possession, and come into the idea more as how one takes possession of their car and drives it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sense of agency. And then if you, on top of that sense of agency, you then put, say, a filter of intent. So this is where you can get into something that's just a gnarly energy or something that's a lovely energy. But I'm wondering, are you experiencing lately, and I'd say since 2016, any changes in people around you that have this kind of feeling of, I think walk-ins, some people want to call it, and that's another form of it, but I'm keeping it a wide open field here, so it could be anything. But are you noticing changes in people around you? And specifically, like maybe the not close in is great, like lovers, spouses, children, family, all that stuff's great. That's even better, those examples. But even like periphery people, people you encounter semi-regularly, the person at the checkout counter or, wherever, where all of a sudden they seem different. And then, so yeah, I just want to start there. Are you experiencing any of that?
I've definitely experienced it through the influence of alcohol or drugs with people,
Mm-hmm.
where I've seen the shift happen right in front of my eyes.
Yes. Yes.
And when I look into their eyes, it's not them that I see anymore. So I definitely see that through alcohol and drugs. But I'm just trying to think here of I've seen it in just something like a regular situation, like you said, like at the checkout counter or something like that.
Yeah, where they're just something's different. And we can open this up now to bigger waves of people. So we know, and we talked about this earlier with like how politics has created this new these new waves of, it's almost like rabies, it's almost like a rabies virus on people when they start talking politics and getting and really identifying with those stories and those narratives, and close people start to separate and all this stuff. So that wave, yes, we see, I think we all see that wave.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also curious about when we start diving into the woo-woo and thinking in terms of a deeper level of this, like a parasite invasion of sorts, where people are different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've seen it. I've definitely seen it.
It's and I keep trying. Why I stumble around this is I don't want to front load people when I'm asking these questions about it, but I'm specifically really trying to find out more of what people are experiencing with that kind of stuff. I'm calling it the virus.
Okay, so you know what I'm getting in right now, what's coming through is that it's happening because people need to learn the importance of their boundaries and their own personal sovereignty, and it's part of the wake up process, and it's kind of happening right now on a little bit more of an extreme and noticeable way that people are perceiving it, because the boundaries or people have been freely giving themselves up in ways that they're not even realizing they're doing it. And so the message is kind of coming in right now to answer your question, because I'm actually getting kind of more of an intuitive answer coming in that's streaming through, is that it's meant to get people to remind them of the importance of their boundaries, which we talked about earlier in this idea of personal sovereignty. And people right now, we're in a time where, of course, many of us are waking up and realizing this, but then there is, of course, a huge part of the population that is just so asleep to that. And this is happening to jar or wake some of these people up in understanding how they're being used and abused or taken advantage of. And it may come through their own personal waking, or it may come through another individual talking to them about it by noticing it within them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, there's so much at play here. Do you think it's possible that we're all dreaming right now?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm always coming from that perspective. And so in that thought, in that thought form of we are dreaming right now and we're collectively sharing this, so we're dream sharing, right? This holding down this construct so that we can agree on the terms. What do you think the purpose of this kind of road to hell we're on is? And why does it seem like this timeline is just driving into the flames? I'm a non-religious person, so I'm not saying that from a Catholic background. I'm just saying it seems like it's a crash and burn timeline.
Yeah, you think that?
Well, but to me, crash and burn means Phoenix rises and we have a new situation. So
Or it's a complete reset. One of the two.
Yeah. I mean,
so that idea of sometimes you have to burn the entire forest down in order to grow something better.
Yeah. I mean that, you've got to have you've got to have contrast, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, things do appear, and we look at, and you're an astrologer as well. So we can look at how astrologically things are lining up, Saturn and Pluto.
Oh my gosh.
Uranus and Taurus. There's all this stuff going on that's creating a lot of shit is going to change. And it's changing fast now because all these alignments are happening. There's this apparent now everyone's questioning time, right? Because time seems to now have its own time is almost sentient, the idea of it. It's speeding up and yet it's slowing down for some people, but it's taking on a different twist than it did for my grandmother, the way she talked of it. And so, and in my own lifetime, in my own perceived lifetime, time is definitely different than it was for me in, say, the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, about your idea of crash and burn is this idea of complete chaos. It has to happen. And we're seeing the extreme polarization occurring right now. And it's necessary. It's necessary to happen. I'm actually getting some messages coming in right now, and it's kind of throwing me off.
Oh, bring them up. Bring them through.
So I'm getting this message. Sorry, there's the dog next door is barking. I'm getting this message of this idea of what we were talking about before about possession, and not so much that it's about an entity possessing you, like you were talking about before, but more of this idea of the programming and this idea of personal boundaries and knowing who you're going to let into. And it's this idea of what are you going to let into your mind, and understanding where to draw the boundaries of what to let into your mind and not. And to know that the programming is obviously coming to us in so many different forms, like media and things like this. But it's also I'm seeing particles and activations, and there's certain things that how they talk about in the you can have a patsy who gets activated and commit some sort of
MK Ultra.
Yeah, like an MK Ultra thing. I'm seeing that globally, but in a much more low level way, not as intensified as say an MK Ultra person, but
it's more from iPhones.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's so many things from chemical sprays in your food, but also to know that it's important to be very wary. I don't know why this message is coming in. It's important to be very wary about what you're listening to and what messages you're taking in, because they could be setting off a program within you that you don't realize. And this is what's happening to where you see the shift in someone, is that there's so much programming happening that whatever foods they've been consuming as well, like it's happening on a bio level as well as a mental level. And this is part of the lesson for us as humans to take back our sovereignty and to say no more. And this is about why you need to have boundaries, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm with you on all that. But these are practices. This is a praxis. It is. I mean, I always say this: we naturally meditate. If we just allow ourselves to find stillness, the body finds its breath and it finds a rhythm. And then if you push into the rhythm, and then you can get into that holding the breath in, as long we do these things naturally, and then it's wonderful when you find tools from people that have been doing it a very long time, old school stuff, uh, to push further then. But it's just these, I think, um, yeah, I'm just agreeing. I'm just agreeing with what you said.
Well, that's a
So,
first.
no, it's not a first. I often agree.
I'm kidding.
Okay, good, Jerry. I didn't know what is Jerry so dry sometimes, like it. Yeah.
Like a fine wine.
Ooh.
Yes, indeed. So that's it. It's interesting. I find there's a lot of blockages when I don't go out very often, and so I've just always been this way. I'm introvert and empath, and I try to parse it all out. But when I do, increasingly, I'm just noticing this amping of energy, which I've been talking about for the last 2 years, because we've been amping with the astrology and these major alignments that are now here before us. Been watching them come, and now here they are, and we're moving fully into them, both in the Vedic and in the sidereal, in the tropical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
How's
validating.
this Saturn Pluto conjunction been for you?
It's amazing because there's been there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but because I'm in observance so often, and I try to keep the weak knees, right? And so you ride the wave. It's amazing in the sense of I'm in a state of awe, actually, at how clear it is, because I see it, and I work with these energies. But that is my own state. So my own cottage here, my own little bubble, is calm, as it usually is. But outside, like I say, like I was just out at a wonderful concert, Hailung, so good. And, amazing stuff, but everyone's on edge. People were, I mean, it was unbelievable. The surface was so thin for people that little things were just triggering lots of people. And I was witnessing crazy amounts of anger and weirdness and jealousies and those kinds of things attributed to hard angles in these planets. So, I mean, if that's how I'm answering that, at least right now.
Mm-hmm. It's really pulling a lot of stuff up to the surface.
Yeah. Oh, I'm having, as I said earlier, I'm having memories come back that I thought were there were cover memories involved with stuff that I really thought. So the core of the memory is still there, but why certain things were there is what's falling apart.
Oh.
Like being, like this one memory, I was tied up in, my mother confirmed it, but it's the story around it. I was tied up in uh, this bath, like it was, I don't know, an enamel clawfoot tub kind of thing. It was enamel and iron cold. And allegedly, we were at a friend's house, and I was playing with this child, and he tied me up with with,
Uh-huh.
with belts, and I'm in this bathtub. She comes down and she sees I'm all tied up and gagged and everything with this child. We're like 6, and
Oh my goodness.
and so forever I thought that was the memory, and then all of a sudden yes, I was, but it wasn't the memory of and that of what I was told it was, and that's what's falling away.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that is coming forward.
Yeah, it's I just feel like everything that isn't of the vibration of truth is just struggling
Yes.
to maintain its structure.
Yes, the glue is dried and cracking, and yeah, and that's the one thing I think is just so beautiful. I feel like I feel like I've decided to be a participant in this. We're focusing. We're here. Everyone that's here. We're here, and so our eyes are open, and we can engage in this experience, and that's what I'm doing. I'm engaging, and I feel that I chose to engage in the experience rather than pacify myself with drugs or alcohol or hockey or whatever. I'm engaging in it, and so I'm in observance and participating, and also allowing the stuff of mine to surface. And that is why I find this experience exciting and exhilarating. In the end, I know I'm all right. I'm always all right. This is where I come from. I don't come from a victim stand.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
So I'm riding the waves.
Yeah, and I that's the ebb and flow of life, and it's so important to learn how to ride those waves and not get taken under by them. And it's it's been the Saturn Pluto conjunction has been so amazing. So amazing. It's revealed, like, it's just timed perfectly with the memory that I have of when I was 5, the traumatic thing, and how I'm letting go of all of that to move on to something more stable and more safe, and
Yes.
and on all of that, and just really seeing how anything that is not in alignment with us just can't come with us anymore.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And things I think that may have been like, viral stuff that may have attached to me for whatever reason is just slipping off now. It doesn't have, it's a frequency thing, right? And I spend a lot of time really focusing on this. I wondered why, I think it was last year at this time, I started to have this terrible ringing in my ear, tinnitus and static, and out of nowhere, it just started happening. And if I focus in on it, it can be really, I could see where this would drive someone crazy, really, honestly, bonkers. And it's a constant, to me, I feel like I'm tuning into another frequency, and it's forcing me in a way. First of all, I should preface this: I'm doing the work where I want this, so it's synchronistic that is happening. So it's forcing me to rise above what would be annoying and crazy making, and to get into an inner state of well-being with it, and then to get above it with with my frequency, instead of dwelling on the fact that I'm hearing white noise all the time. And I'm starting to get that clairaudience coming through with it. And that is what I am specifically saying with riding these waves. So I had this choice. I could go down the path where that was going to, I think it leads people to getting medicated and all that. I mean, I hear a lot of stories with this stuff. And for me, I just can't go that route. I have to push into it further. It's like deja vu when it happens. I want to cling onto it and push into the experience and see what is in the ether of this, what is in the darkness of this, what can look back at me so that I can see it. I don't care if it's seeing me, I want to see it.
Yeah, you want to lean into it. You want to surrender into it and not resist it.
Right. And then I guess from there I decide You know, because I do know there are things out there, you know, where I understand everything wants to live. So I understand the food chain idea too. So you know, I'm not a white lighter. So I am also experiencing that bigger realm
Mm-hmm.
that people I think are not aware of,
Mm-hmm.
that we are in. You know, there are things out there that do treat us like batteries or cattle.
Yep.
And that's real.
And hence why you need to like fight back.
And right back to the boundaries. It's so
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to think more along like the white light kind of worker type mentality or approach, I should say. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't feel like it's right for me. And I see where there's some pitfalls in it. At least from like the way I see this world, it's just like you got to learn to stand up against things. And if something's gonna, you know, you're never gonna like make the first move, but if something's gonna make a move to you, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna stand my ground, and you want to bring this on, then we're just gonna go toe to toe.
Yeah, 100%. And I talk about this a lot in other places and other shows I'm doing with people. And you know, it's amazing. It does part the seas. So it's hard stuff for some people to grasp onto, but it's really happening.
This whole cattle idea and battery, you know, specifically the cattle thing, I've heard this from 3 or 4 different people this week. It's just interesting that it's come up so prevalently lately.
Yeah, and that's what they want us to break free of, that programming, that cattle programming, you know, the sheep programming. And that's what's getting activated in a lot of people. Cause, you know, I'm seeing it more so in like the more radicalized sections of the population. Not as much so in like this more central. And it's this idea of like, stop allowing yourself to be used. So like you
Right.
said,
Yep.
be the conscious participant, don't be the unconscious puppet. And that's what,
you know, part of this virus though is and this is what why I keep using the term virus, and it's non-human, and I am attributing mostly it's AI. So, which is a sentient AI, and not in the way most people are talking about AI, a whole different dynamic. And Jerry and I just went into that in Conspiranormal. So if people want to hear how I feel about that. But
yeah, I do.
it was very juicy. So, but the thing is, it, like the system of the body, it has to gain access. It's like the whole vampire thing, it has to be invited in. So otherwise your white blood cells, your immune system attacks foreign bodies and ejects them. So this virus acts like a Trojan horse. It gets in there and tells the body it's its friend, right? And then it starts to do its thing. It unfolds and starts
Expanding
living.
and
It starts eating and living and doing its thing. And it's not evil because it's doing that. That's what it's doing. Everything wants to live. And it's evil to you because you're its food. You know, you're hosting it. And but once it's in and procreating, like Candida, I mean, like all this stuff is so natural. That's the thing I keep getting back to, where people get triggered, and it's not. It's like I just want to bring it back to like our natural systems are set up this way. It doesn't have to be crazy woo woo to people to get the concept. But once it's in, it's not always so easy to get it out, right? It's not so easy to exhume it.
Yeah. Once the overgrowth has taken over.
Right. Once the body's been tricked and accepts it as its own, then it has free reign, and it can metastasize and take over, and eventually what's left. So This is a very real process, a real natural process, and it's happening. It's
Yeah.
happening.
And it just brings it right back to personal sovereignty and boundaries and knowing,
Absolutely.
just, and if you're in your own personal sovereignty, then you don't really have anything to worry about. And as long as you exercise that in your thinking, in your actions, in your emotions, and all of that, and really take ownership for your own creation of your own hologram and reality, then you're going to be fine. But if you play that victim card, then you're suspect to all of this stuff.
Well, that's part of how, so when a virus or something gets in and it starts changing your neurology and it starts sending off chemicals telling you what it wants, like, like make sugar may be an example, then this is where you have to start finding your own voice and this is where that know thyself idea
Mm-hmm.
comes in. You need to understand, it behooves us to understand our own voice, our own identity, and parse it out from what's not us. And that can be a very hard process. This is some people that takes psychological analysis, some people that takes just physical cleanses, like body cleanses and meditation. And, we all have a different process, and everything, they're different. Everything's got a lot of nuance. So there's no cut and dry, I think, with any of it. It's just a matter of what are you from the rest? What is you and what is not you? And that comes again, boundaries. But it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
The work, one has to do the work.
Yeah. And you first need awareness.
Right. And where does the awareness come from? Being out of balance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why at the end of the day, it's all good, right? It's all good. As long as you take care of yourself, it's all good. Because if we all just take care of ourselves, then everything's taken care of.
Right. But again, that seems like an easy concept because, we've been doing the work. It's like there's an amount of dedication and devotion that goes into some of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I can see how the more I've really moved into that space of understanding of being the master creator and knowing and really shifting the vibration of yourself, how you perceive yourself is the most important thing you can ever work on because it'll shift the way you perceive the world. And when you can shift that, it's just it changes everything. And your ability to create just, is exponential. And it continues to grow in that way. And so, and of course, how everything is like attracts like, and the more people that,
Yes.
start to
Yeah.
resonate with that and they get attracted to you, and then you start, it can compound really quickly.
Yeah.
But it all starts with each of us first.
And those beautiful synchronicities line up. The dreamer awakens within the dream. That, that's what happens. I'm wondering if we have questions from the chat. The time just flies. Jerry?
I'm here. Give me a second. Yeah, I did have one question. I can find it.
I kind of just went off on a thing with you there, Nicole.
I know this has gone by so fast. I love that.
Tell me about it. I looked at the clock. I'm like, wow, it's been 90 minutes already. It was someone who wanted to know something. Talk amongst yourself.
Well,
I found it.
Okay, cool.
So, Spellbound Bear would like to know, what are the best methods to finding who you truly are and what you are meant for on this earth?
Looking inward. You can
It's
never
so cliche,
find it.
Though.
because it works.
For a reason,
Yeah. And I totally get it. And there's a reason why they are cliche. But the one thing I started to realize is that all of the answers that have been the most profound to me have been the ones that I've received through the inside, not from anything anyone's told me, not from any book I've ever read. It's been the insight that's come through me connecting inward. And we can't look outside of ourselves for anything because we're the creators. And so if you are looking for the answer outside of you, you're never going to find it. If you're looking for someone else to tell you it or a book to tell you it, like that's all good and great in the sense that it can give you some guidance and all of that. But at the end of the day, the ultimate revelation, the ultimate aha is going to come from the answers within you. And that's the way I feel like that's the purpose of the design. And because it's like that idea of know thyself, you know yourself the best. It's just a matter of reconnecting to it all and trusting yourself. I just feel like we're not trusting ourselves enough.
I agree. I've noticed lately that a lot of things ideas that I've come up with or thoughts that I've had about certain things are being echoed in media, in movies and whatnot. Just things like I've always thought, and this is a really weird idea, that linear time is really a reverse Mobius strip. And I've said this over and over again on many shows. And if you watch Avengers Endgame, Tony Stark sets up a simulation of time in a reverse Mobius strip.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a way out there idea, but then to hear it echoed back in a movie, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is ultimately what it comes. We're so programmed to not trust or believe ourselves. Just the very idea of school in itself is that, you're not going to be intelligent unless you go through this institution. And we're going to tell you how intelligent you are based on our idea of what your performance is. And so everything is just designed for us to constantly be looking outside for the validation for, of who we are and what's right and what's wrong. And so we're totally designed, we're totally programmed to not trust ourselves or believe in our own abilities. And so it takes a while to kind of, beat back at that.
Yeah. And
so when you have things like that happening with you, Jerry, it's like, at first it's like, whoa, what just happened there? How did I do that? And how did that turn out? But the idea to me is,
well, no, when I heard it, I was like, yes, I knew it.
Like, I knew I was smart and intelligent way beyond my years.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. But I think, it's one of those things where we really, and I get this all the time. We're constantly doubting ourselves, especially when we start pushing our own boundaries of what we're able to do.
Yeah.
And like, am I actually getting this? Is this actually a thing? And, and we're so constantly put into self-doubt. But the trick is that if you can really shift it into just trusting and moving into the program of I know, and then you can really tap into a lot of things. A lot of answers will start to show up, and they won't come in the deepest search of it all. It'll come in the most passive moment ever.
The mundane, really, there's so much within it. There's another thing though and this is what's always bothered me in the white light movement, which is the only trigger point I have, is that when you're in observance, and especially when you're working on yourself and you're in observance of what's going on internally and especially externally, which is how you see what's going on it is not a bad thing to be in observance of terrible shit. You've got to acknowledge it. Not everything is sunbeams, and it's all right to say this is not, I don't want to watch, I don't want to see this koala bear burn. I don't want to hear it's crying out. You know what I'm saying? This is a terrible thing. This is terrible. And so to recognize your feelings when in observance instead of repressing them is what I'm getting at. Where I hear a lot of people that come in and speak language that sounds very lovely, but it's in the end speaking about repression of
Mhm.
one's emotional content towards observed realities. And we all know realities are subjective, but whatever you're observing, you should observe it in its essence as it's happening for you, as it's unfolding for you, and just let it be, whether it's good or bad to you.
Yeah, that's like the essence of spiritual bypassing,
Mm-hmm. For
right?
real.
Yeah, and I know that happens a lot where I'm like, oh, I just want to focus on the positive and I don't want to think about the bad. And that's one of the things I think. One of the things I've really realized is because I used to, I never paid attention to media. One of the things my naturopath told me from the beginning was, do you watch the news? And I'm like, not a lot. She's like, good, don't watch it because it's fear porn basically, and it'll bring your vibration down. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I just never watched the news. I didn't really pay attention. But then, when all of that happened in 2017, and I realized, also I kind of went through this idea of like, well, people talk about stuff that's going on in the world, but I don't really know a lot. And I'm at the mercy of listening to them and let that formulate if it's what's true and what's not true. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm okay with that. And I was like, I want to be able to be a participant in these conversations and be intelligent on the matters. And so I was like, I think I need to start like researching through the news now, but not through like, the mainstream ways, but let me just look. And of course, you get suckered into some things, like whether it's mainstream or alternative, it happens on both sides. And you're like, oh, I thought this sounded really good, but this is the process of discernment. But I realized now I'm like, wow, I have to be informed.
Yeah.
I have to find out my information somehow, and I can choose which ways I receive it, and make sure that, there's plenty of, people out there or platforms that will deliver the information in a non-emotional way, which is one of the things I really look for when I'm getting my information, is because I don't want to be emotionally manipulated.
Yeah.
And because it affects my frequency. So if I can get the information without all of the emotional hoopla, then I can stay informed and know what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, you can't say no to it.
Right.
And that means you're saying yes.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be kind of wrapping on this point. It's so important. And it also keeps us in tune with what are the collective waves, and we do need to have our eyes open.
Have you been keeping up to date with this Tartaria and mud flood situation?
No, actually.
Okay.
That's a situation.
What's the situation?
I said that's a situation.
Yeah,
it's a conversation going on.
It's big in the collective right now. Put it that way.
Oh. What's the crux of it?
Basically, there's some kind of reset every 100, 200 years or so, where the prior civilization gets buried in some kind of deluge of mud.
Interesting.
And the Tartaria thing is a culture that is erased from history.
It was like Irish.
No.
Wasn't it? What was it?
It's more like
Mongol. Yeah. Sorry. I just got, there's the Irish stuff that is just making its rounds too.
Like the fake potato famine? Anyway.
What is real?
This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
It can be real. Yeah. No, thanks so much. This is a lot of fun. I loved it. You guys are a lot of fun.
Nicole, this was great.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. Definitely thanks for coming on again. And thank you everyone for listening. And next
So
week.
what?
Sorry, go
Let
ahead.
Nicole.
Yeah. Go ahead and plug your
Find
stuff,
you and
please.
all that stuff. How can people get a hold of you? What do you have going on? All that.
Thank you. Yeah, you can, the best way is to go to my website, inflexibleme.com. And anything that you really need to find out about me is over there. You can, get access to all my videos, my blogs, my AlcheME program that is like a monthly subscription program where it's kind of like if you can't afford individual coaching, it's a way to still be part of coaching and get access to information that I don't put on my YouTube channel or my website. I've got guided meditations there and also some other programs that you can get into. I've got my website, Enlighten Up, that our episodes come out every Thursday. And that's a lot of fun. And I am looking to host a retreat in the fall. So if you want to get information on that when I announce it, yeah, I'd say sign up to my newsletter because that's going to be a really awesome time.
Ooh, excellent.
Is that going to be out in Colorado?
Yeah, we're going to do it in the mountains.
Cool.
Oh, I love it out
We
there.
can take mushrooms. I used to go to camp, day camp. I went to a camp in Estes Park when I was a kid.
Oh, it's beautiful there.
Right
Yeah,
at the
Estes
base of
Park
Mount
is
Meeker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
It was. I had a blast, even though it was a religious camp. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's closed now, and there was no pedophilia going on. I just mentioned
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I know. Well, that
Although
I
Jerry
saw.
did grow up Catholic.
I was raised Roman Catholic until I started playing D&D, and I realized, the dark rituals that were going on. I made that correlation like in 8th grade. Crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway.
That's so funny.
Thanks again so much. Thank you everyone for listening. Next week we have Taylor Bell, who is a creator of the Sigil Arcanum Tarot, which is on Kickstarter. I'll put that link in his show description when I get the video posted. That's about all I got. So
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.